Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this ARRF Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund Request Process Info session. I'm glad you're all here. Hopefully all of your questions will be answered within the presentation. I also have some questions that were submitted before, and I appreciate the prior advance notice of those questions, and I will get to those at the end. Hopefully most of them will be answered before that. The ones that you have that come up during this session, just please drop them in the chat if you could. If not, you can email me afterwards because we would like to add them to our official FAQ on our webpage. All right, so let's just go ahead and jump in. If anybody cannot hear me, if you could drop that in the chat. Well, I guess you wouldn't know what I'm saying if you can't hear me, but if you're having any trouble with anything technology related, just drop it in the chat. We'll see how we can get you in and you can hear. If not, if there are any big problems, all of you are going to receive a replay after this info session. You're also going to receive a frequently asked questions page, and you're going to receive the official application. So you'll have all that with you. So let's get started with the obvious question. What is the Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund? A lot of questions came in about this, wondering if this was the same as RICO funds, and the answer is yes. The county policy is called the Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund, and that is why we are referring to it that way. And for short, we call it ARRF or ARRF. The Pima County Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund has been created by forfeiture of property that constituted the proceeds of a crime or that was used or intended to be used to commit crime. The Pima County Attorney's Office provides grant funding via this fund to community-based programs in Pima County, whose missions are supportive of and consistent with a law enforcement effort, policy, or initiative pursuant to these ARRF statutes that you can see on the screen. If not, you will get the replay of this session, and or federal law. That's really important. The basic requirements look like this. To qualify, you must specifically involve law enforcement personnel or otherwise include specific content which extends or enhances the efforts of law enforcement in the community. Let's look at some examples. Assisting victims of crime, preventing crime, including by providing programs for at-risk youth. We'll get into this a little bit more in detail because this is there are specific criteria for that. Deterring crime, rehabilitation of offenders, enhancing emergency response by law enforcement, protecting people and property from crime, reducing the effects of crime. These are the basic statutory requirements for funding. An important note is that a program may benefit the community generally, but still not qualify for Pima County Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund funds. This is important to note because you must demonstrate in your application how your program meets the criteria. Our office must be a good steward of these federal funds. Funding priorities for this cycle are initiatives that focus on second chance or vulnerable population housing or protecting elderly residents from the effects of crime, initiatives that focus on overdose prevention, especially Narcan distribution, and initiatives for youth engagement and efforts to cut into the school to prison pipeline. That one we're going to get into a little bit right now. So as you can see on the screen, those are the funding priorities that I just went over. Let's talk about what is the school to prison pipeline, because it's pretty specific. It doesn't just mean, oh, you're going to keep kids out of trouble so that they don't go into the system necessarily. The school to prison pipeline officially, or from what I've researched, it refers to the education and public safety policies that push students into the criminal legal system. So schools send students into the pipeline through zero tolerance disciplinary policies, which involve the police and minor misbehavior and often lead to arrests and juvenile detention referrals. So something that we can get to cut into that pipeline would be great. I would say to make your application really strong, I would research the school to prison pipeline if that is something that you're interested in including in your application. And now we're going to get to the actual application itself. The best way to fill in the application is going to be with the fillable PDF we provide you. Those who are registered in advance, which all of you are, for this info session will receive a copy of the application. Others may request the application by emailing the ARRF request email, which I will provide to you in the presentation towards the end. And remember, if you run out of space on any of the items, you can attach more pages to your application. So this is going to be pretty much the first page. Before you get to the application itself, you'll see the whole policy from the county about the ARRF. But here's the first page of the application. Now, you have to be a 501c3 or C4 organization to apply. As you can see, the email is arrfrequest@pcao.pima.gov. So you're going to direct all of your correspondences to that email address. That helps because if I'm not around, there are others who can get to your email. Okay, on this page, 2 things to know. A law enforcement agency is us, Pima County Attorney's Office. There are other law enforcement agencies that distribute these types of funds. They have their own process. On our application, you would enter Pima County Attorney for the law enforcement agency. How much is the requested amount? Up to $2,500, up to $2,500. You do not have to request that entire amount. You may request less funding depending on how much your programming expenses are. Then you're going to get to the question part of the ARRF application. This is where you can include the intended results of your program and how they benefit the community in general. An example, this program will teach youth from low-income households about the dangers of drug use and how to avoid or get out of situations where they will be offered drugs. Or you could say this program will reduce the rates of recidivism by teaching life skills, job skills, and housing assistance to those transitioning back in society after being incarcerated. This is going to be that first general question. How does it benefit the community? The next question is, which of our funding priorities is supported by your program? I'm going to just say out loud again what our funding priorities are. Initiatives that focus on second chance or vulnerable population housing, protecting elderly residents from the effects of crime. Initiatives that focus on overdose prevention, Narcan distribution. Initiatives for youth engagement and efforts to cut into the school to prison pipeline. If you'd like to learn more about our office and how your program may fit with our priorities, you can always visit pcao.pima.gov. Next, we have how specifically will the funds be spent? Something that I want to just bring to your attention here is that we would like it if you have a partnership with law enforcement, for example, explain what the partnership entails in detail. Do not say we have a partnership with law enforcement and leave it at that. We need specifics. What kind of work have you been doing with law enforcement? How have these things been going for you? And what do you plan to do in your next program? That includes law enforcement. Okay, then this one is prohibitions on spending. Some people had asked me what were some do's and don'ts there. They're listed in the policy. Examples include food, gift cards, the creation of scholarships, and clothing for the public. Now we're going to look at, oh, one more thing. Proposals should focus on the funding initiatives announced per grant cycle and be limited to program expenses outside of personnel costs. And we're going to look at some examples of the budget breakdown because that is where this question comes in. So how specifically will the funds be spent? We need you to be specific dollar for dollar. There are 2 ways you can do this. One of them you can see is a table breakdown. These are going to show you more total amounts, like $5,000, $3,000. That's because in the past we've been able to give out more funds per request. So you can see the table shows exactly what they are going to be spending their RICO funds on or their ARRF funds on, dollar for dollar. So it breaks everything down, and then at the end we see the total. Please make sure that these totals match up because we've had them where they haven't matched up before. This is another way you could do it. This one, the totals don't match up, so this had to go back to the requester again. But you can say if you are going to spend, I'm going to spend $1,000 on vendors, I'm going to spend $500 on renting the facility. You can say that just in the answer to the question here. It doesn't have to be a table, but it really does help if it is. All right, now there's a question that our office asked specifically. Please describe how your initiative will assist people from underserved communities and or those who have been marginalized by conviction history. These are the factors taken into consideration when determining which funds will be allocated and to who. Remember, you must be a 501c3 or C4. You will need a tax ID number. Applications without a tax ID number will not be considered for funding. The signature on this equals your agency director. Someone else cannot sign in place of the agency director. At this point, you've come to the end of your application. It's pretty simple. You just fill in the questions. Please leave the signature field here blank because that is where the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, Laura Conover, is going to be putting her signature. So the name is Pima County Attorney Laura Conover, and her signature and date need to be done by her. Now, next thing we're going to do, look at some possible scenarios of the approval and denial process. So here's scenario number one. The 501c3 or C4 contacts the community outreach coordinator to request the application. That'll be me, and you'll do that through ARRF request at pcao.pima.gov. Next, the application will be reviewed by me. The application is complete and meets criteria. Then I'm going to send it to our legal administrator and our civil division to review. If that's all good, then the application gets routed to the county attorney for her signature. And then it goes to the Board of Supervisors. And if they approve, applicant will fill out a W-9 and new vendor record request form and submit to the community outreach coordinator. And then a check will be issued to the applicant. So that's approval scenario one. Everything went perfectly. Approval scenario two might be a little bit different. So our 501c3 or C4 does the same thing, contacts me for the application. Now this will be a little bit different for those of you who are actually on this live info session. You will be getting that automatically. The organization is going to submit the completed application to ARRF request pcao.pima.gov. The application will be reviewed by me. If it's deemed incomplete or it needs corrections, I am going to send it back to you, and it must be resubmitted before the deadline. The deadline in this case is October 15th. If the application is complete and meets criteria after that, it's going to go to our legal administrator and civil division for review. And if that goes well, we're routed to the county attorney for signature. The thing with that I should kind of back up on here is that if the county attorney does not sign it, she has that prerogative, like that's really up to her, then that's it, like the process is over. Board of Supervisors, if they approve after the county attorney signs, then the applicant fills out a W-9 and vendor record request form and submits, and then we cut the check. Yay! Okay, here's a denial scenario. This is how it could go. I kind of mentioned this in the last slide. but the first parts are going to be the same. And if it's complete, meets criteria, legal, administrator, civil division review, it's routed to the county attorney for signature. If the request does not meet the county attorney's criteria for ARRF funding or is not approved by her, then a denial letter will be sent to the applicant. Now here's another scenario. Another scenario is that the outreach coordinator, legal administrator, or civil attorney will review the application. It will be rejected just because it will not fit the guidelines, or there may be a conflict of interest. As stated earlier, your program may benefit the community and still not qualify for ARRF funds. Please review the policy, which will be included when you receive your application. Again, everyone on this live session is going to receive the application automatically. All right, denial scenario 2, we just covered that. So you're going to go through everything, and the Board of Supervisors, say the Board of Supervisors votes no on your application. That's going to be, again, the final word, and we'll send you a denial letter. All right, and once your request is approved, if and when, the Community Outreach Coordinator will send you 2 forms. This is the vendor request record form, and you can see here what it looks like. I'm just including that so you can get an idea of what it would look like, what you'll need to fill in. Then you'll also need to submit a W-9 as it says there. And you all probably know what a W-9 looks like. So just make sure that everything matches up, vendor request and W-9. That has to be signed by your director. Okay, I'm going to get to the questions you all submitted. I had some interesting questions, the pre-submitted questions. Number 1 says, in the past, we have used ARRF funds to pay for strangulation exams, but that goes through a direct funding process within our office. So we are definitely interested in applications which address this issue. So please call me to discuss further. Any of you can schedule a call or meeting with me to get clarification on how to complete the application, or really any other questions you have. Number 2 had to do with the when will we be notified. I will keep you updated on the progress of your award. So each part that it's going through, I'm going to give you an email. I'm going to say, oh, I just sent your application up to civil for review. I'll be sending it to the county attorney for a signature next, or oh, it's going to be on the Board of Supervisors agenda, and I'll tell you the date so you can watch the meeting. So that will kind of tell you, if you're holding an event, please try to get your application in at least 2 months prior to the event. So at this point, you have a deadline of October 15th. So if you're having a Halloween event, it's not going to make it in time to the Board of Supervisors for approval. I had a question, how much grant writing knowledge do I need to have? I have minimal experience in this area. How will the outcome be measured for the grant? So the application process should be pretty simple. Now that you've had the step-by-step instructions on how to fill out the form, you don't need to be a grant writing expert. I'm always happy to help you when you run into something that isn't clear. Make sure that you are keeping numbers of, say you have an event, keep the numbers of the participants and what kinds of services they received. Outcome measurements would be that. We would want to know, if you're handing out Narcan, how many boxes of Narcan did you distribute? That would be one example. And I'm always happy to help you if something isn't clear. And make sure you keep your receipts and your accounting really clean, because if you get audited, you want to make sure you have spent the money where you said you were going to spend the money and kept all the receipts for that. I had a question, is this the same RICO money county attorney's office used to make available? Yes, it is the same fund. However, the amount of funding available has dwindled in recent years. You can see a list of awards that have been granted by our office from 2022 until now on our ARRF webpage. And we are a nonprofit organization. This is a 501c19. I don't think that this is going to qualify. They asked if they're servicing and supporting veterans in Tucson, is this enough to qualify for this program? This is not enough on its own. You would want to say, are the veterans you serve specifically at risk of something related to effects of crime, or are they already justice system involved? That may be something we could take into consideration. You can always call me or email me if you have questions. Yeah, another question about how do these funds differ from RICO funds? They don't. Let's see. We just want to stay consistent with what the policy says, which is anti-racketeering revolving fund. And will the info session be available? Yes, it will. And let me just see if there are any questions that I can answer right off the bat. I believe that water is covered if you want to provide water at your event or program, but food is not. And then what ages are included in elderly and what ages are included in youth? I think for sure youth would be anywhere up to 24 years old. Elderly, I don't think that we can put an age on that. But you can call me and talk to me about what populations that you're looking at serving. We can talk about that. 501c19 probably doesn't apply, but I will check with our civil division to find out more. More than one, yes. Can more than one application from the same nonprofit be submitted? Yes. And the reason is because sometimes there are nonprofit organizations that may not have their 501c3 quite yet, but they can have a fiscal sponsor. So if there's a neighborhood group that needs to hold an event, most neighborhood groups are not 501c3s, so they can get someone else to be their fiscal sponsor. Something to look out for is if you are a religious organization, you will need to give me a call so we can talk about conflicts of interest. And I think that's about it. Hopefully you all got a lot out of that. Just send me an email if you have any other questions or concerns, or you can give me a call and I will be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And that is all. Thank you so much for attending, and I will hopefully be talking to you and seeing your applications come in very soon. And I appreciate you all. Thank you.